Hi, and welcome to this new podcast. If you have stumbled across it on YouTube or on Spotify or on Google Podcast, you may be wondering, why didn't I see this sooner, or what is this? This is the first episode of a podcast called Let's Talk About. This podcast will mainly talk about cinema, more specifically Asian cinema, as well as that music. I myself, I'm a foreigner, so I'm not Asian at all, but I have a very strong passion for Asian cinema. I think it's quite good, so I'd say I give it a shot with a podcast. And for the first episode of this podcast, I'm going to talk about Indian cinema, more specifically South Indian cinema, and Netflix Tamil anthology, Paava Kadhaigal, which recently dropped on December or November. I clearly don't remember, but I think November. I think more November. Anyway, the first episode of Let's Talk About, it's gonna be Let's Talk About the Tamil Netflix anthology, Paava Kadhaigal. Shall we? So let's talk about this movie, Paava Kadhaigal, by first saying that it is the first ever anthology or movie, Tamil movie, South Indian movie, which has been produced by Netflix. And more so, it's an anthology, which I think is amazing from a production point of view. A platform as big as Netflix producing Tamil movie is definitely something that a lot of people wouldn't have expected. Neither I had it expected. Earlier on in the year, in 2020, there has been another anthology which has been produced by Amazon Prime, which was Pudam Pulu Kalai. It had still four main directors, the same as Paava Kadhaigal. Yet I think it wasn't as smooth as Paava Kadhaigal itself. This is not the only anthology we're gonna get this year. As a matter of fact, Netflix is already producing, well, it's gonna be released very soon on the 19th of February. I think by the time this podcast will be out, the movie will be out as well. I'm talking about Telugu anthology, which is another South Indian language, and it's Pitta Katalu. I know that the titles may sound really similar, but I don't think they have a similar kind of story or concept. At least I don't think so. I'm very excited to watch it because it's going to be another South Indian anthology. But yeah, let's talk about Paava Kadhaigal. The four main directors that have been chosen by Netflix for this anthology have been Sudha, Kongara, Gautam, Menon, Vignesh, Shivan, and Vetrimaraan. I have to say, I was very happy with the choice. I didn't expect such a very huge list of names for the first ever anthology. Sudha Kongara now has been on the top of her game because of Sudha Raipotra, a Tamil movie which has been released on Amazon Prime, which is very good. Absolutely, I enjoyed it a lot, and I'm very happy that she got chosen by Netflix to be part of this anthology. The next one is Gautam Menon, which I am very acquainted with his work because my first ever Tamil movie, I was 14 or 15 at the time, was Vinatandi Varuvaya. his 2010 movie. I think is a classic by now. We could call it a classic. It's been 11 years now. But you can definitely sense that kind of narrative when watching as well as segment in Paava Kadhaigal. The music as well, it sounds very similar. The way the story is set, I'll talk about it in a second, in a much more general, broad spectrum. But let me finish the director's list. We have Vignesh, Shivan, of which I didn't know a lot of work until now, until I found he was in this anthology. He's a very young director. Maybe that's why I don't know a lot of his work. I haven't had the pleasure to watch any of his work, but I definitely will. I'm a bit guilty of it, I will say it, but definitely by looking at this anthology, I had a chance to see his narration style, his direction style, his story writing as well, because we have to remember that all of the 4 directors wrote and directed, and some of them even acted their stories. In the case of Gautam Menon, he is also one of the actors in his own story. Last but not least, I think is a household name by now. It's Vetrimaraan. Vetrimaraan, I think, is one of the most famous Tamil directors. He had a lot of works released throughout the years. Mainly, I think he had many collaborations with Dhanush. But other than that, I'm thinking about Adu Kalam or Bada Chennai as well, which is one of the most recent ones. And I'm sorry about the pronunciations. As I said, I'm not Indian or Asian, but I'm trying my best to pronounce the names as I go along. But yeah, let's talk about the segments, shall we? The first segment, it's by Sudha Kongara. And I have to say, all of the 4 segments in the anthology, they have a particular theme. At least they go 2 by 2. So the order in the anthology is Sudha Kongara, Vignesh, Shivan, then you have Gautam Menon's story, and then you have Vetrimaraan closing. One thing that Netflix did cleverly, first of all, is to divide all of the segments into episodes, which is something I didn't expect. It was a very clever move, because if we compare as well Pudam Pudu Kalai is in one go, while Paava Kadhaigal, it's divided into sections. So if you ever get tired, or you don't want to watch a specific sections yet, or if you want to even interchange the order, you're free to do so. I think in my own opinion, I think the last 2 sections may be switched, because what happens with these stories is that they have either a similar thematic, or as well they're connected within the story itself. The segments of Gautam Menon and Vetrimaraan are connected within the story, so I would say that if you switch Vetrimaraan and Gautam Menon's, I think you'd have a much more clear spectrum of the thematic and the connections. But let's go back to Sudha Kongara and Vignesh Shivan, because they share the same kind of theme. The theme of Sudha Kongara and Vignesh Shivan's stories, it mainly revolves around caste and LGBTQ issues in India, specifically southern India, which I think it's even more conservative than northern India. You know, I think that in the recent years, Bollywood really put an emphasis in promoting LGBTQ issues in their movies, at least. Some flopped, some did really well, but nevertheless they put an emphasis. I think this is one of the few, if not even the first time, Tamil cinema really tried to put an emphasis on LGBTQ issues. And Sudha Kongara kind of put an emphasis. Actually, it's not even the first time, because if we think about Super Deluxe, it's kind of, it has the same issues. I'm talking about Tyaga Kumar Raja's Super Deluxe, starring Vijay Sethupathi, where Vijay Sethupathi interprets a transgender woman. And we kind of have a similar vibe going on in Sudha Kongara's segment, which I have to say, it was really touching. It was really touching because we have, again, a similar case of a transgender man who is not fully transgender. He wants to move to Bombay to actually have the whole kind of the horse surgery. He doesn't have too much money though. He lives in a very small village, so he's a victim of people not believing or being scared much more than of him, of the person he is. So he's not free to express himself as a woman. I will have to say the character's name is Sattar, so I will refer the character by their names as I go along. So Sattar itself is a very fun-loving character. He makes fun of everything. He's very cocky. I think he behaves in a very cockish kind of way. It really is a joy to the eyes to see such a person, feeling good about being what they want to be, despite having pressures and negative looks by the people of the village and his parents as well. There is another male character in the story, which is Saravanan. Saravanan is Sattar's best friend. There is an actual segment of the movie, or a little fragment, it's not even a segment, where it shows that they are best friends, because he has, I don't remember if it was, I think it was Sattar. Sattar has a photo of him and Saravanan being together. The most sad part about the relationship is that Sattar is in love with Saravanan, but he doesn't know until Saravanan kind of tells him that he's in love with his sister Saira. And yet we feel kind of the heartbreak in Sattar's story, because he is in love with him. He feels understood by Saravanan, and the fact that Saravanan is in love with his sister makes him feel that it's not right. As a matter of fact, he tries to break the relationship between Saravanan and Saira. Saravanan gives Sattar a note to give to Saira, and he says, I will see if I will give it to her, to that witch. He calls her a witch, because he thinks she's much prettier than him, and she's a woman, which is something that it has a certain weight in Sattar's life. To add furthermore, another obstacle of the couple of Saravanan and Saira, Sattar and Saira are both Muslims. They're both Muslims. They are Tamil Muslims. Hence, Saravanan is a Hindu. And yeah, it really isn't the best combo, isn't it? So there will be tensions between, communities. As a matter of fact, they both Saravanan and Saira, they decide to run away. They decide to run away with the help of Sattar. Sattar does it for love. You really see in the scene where he helps them to escape. He really does it with love. And yet it makes me ask a question, not only on the LGBTQ point of view, because unfortunately it's something that you can't really make a man change idea, because if he likes women, unfortunately he cannot change idea if he only sees him as a friend. But the questions that I ask myself is about the matter of love jihad, which is something that is happening a lot in India. It raises a kind of a question of love jihad. Does love jihad really exist? Can intercultural or inter-religious marriages or relationships really exist? We're in 2021, and I think that there should be the freedom of loving whoever you want, and it does also connect to the LGBTQ element of loving whoever you want, of being whoever you want. It is a very important point that I think Sudha Kongara makes in her short, is that you can love whoever you want, no matter the religion or no matter the sexual orientation, because towards the end we'll see Saravanan, because unfortunately, spoiler, and I'm sorry, I should have said it before, if you haven't watched the movie, this is going to be a big spoiler, but Sattar dies at the end of the segment, and Saravanan finds a letter or some money. I think it's some money, his clothes, because he was also thrown outside of his house because his family was ashamed, and he usually gets abused by some people in the village, which are called the drunkies in the short, and they wanted to kill him. He tries to go back to his house, but his father is categorically against him getting inside again, so he escapes, and unfortunately he encounters death at the end of this a terrible night, because it's during the night. And Saravanan and Saira come back to the village after 2 years, I believe. They have a newborn baby. The two families have kind of united. They want to be at peace because of their own son or their own children's good. And they come back in order to let them see the child they have. But as soon both Saira and Saravanan know that Sattar is dead, they drive away, and Saravanan finds his clothes at the bank of a river, and specifically he finds written on the sand the word Tangam, which means darling in Tamil, or at least it is translated as darling in the actual translation, in the actual subtitles. So it's a very tragic end, but with a very high moral, and I think it's a good start for the next segment, which is Vignesh Shivan's segment. Vignesh Shivan's arch or story in Paava Kadhaigal, yet it has the same themes, yes, but it does tackle them in a different way. The story is different. There's a family issue going around still, yet there is religious encased yet again, but it's dealt in a funny way, in a much more kind of uplifting mood, something that Sudha Kongara kind of did go in the middle, like in the start, kind of mid movie, but then the other part goes in a tragic way. Here is different. It starts with a tragic event only to end in a happy mood, which I think it's very good, because the next two stories, which are Gautam Menon's and Vetrimaraan, are very are very dark. So I think that Vignesh Shivan's that little touch that he gave with the funny side of the story gave it a different way of reading the exact same theme. It doesn't have to be always dramatic and numb and over exaggerated with dark or either very heavy loaded subjects, but it can also be funny. It can also be a dramatic comedy. It is something that I appreciate, and also it can speak to younger generations about this kind of theme, not only to the oldest generation, which I think this theme has been chosen also to educate the older generation to accept people who belong to the LGBTQ community, because let's not forget that transgender and the transgender community is very dear, it's a part of the Indian society for decades. So it comes very strange, as in it is very strange that the transgender community or the transgender image is seen as very bad nowadays in society, because it is put in a box and celebrated, put it in a box, but not in a bad way. It's much more so categorized into something that is taking a form, a shape in society, and it's seen as bad. But let's not forget that the transgender community has been in the Indian society for a long time. So I do ask myself, is it really worth it to make it to see it as a bad thing? Same thing goes with the LGBTQ community. It sounds very sad, but that's why these kind of movies are made, to educate people. And yet also Gautam Menon's and Vetrimaaran's movies are made to educate people, more so on the matter of caste and societal approval. Vetrimaraan goes hard, and the fact that it's the last movie that is shown in the series states why. But Gautam Menon as well, he goes into that kind of introspective on the woman's side, what women are so obsessed with societal look and societal values, while Vetrimaraan goes really hard on the patriarchal kind of stigma, and not stigma, but patriarchal thinking and societal stigma. It is really something that I didn't expect, especially in Vetrimaaran's. Vetrimaaran's was very dark. It sounds all very kind of nice and funny because it's a family reunion, but then you see at Prakash Raj's character, he's a psycho. And in the same way, in Gautam Menon's movie, Simran's character, Mati, she looks like a bit of a psycho as well. Like, they kind of intertwine, they kind of link together, but yet they have morals at the end, which is something that has to be valuable. What I'm really happy about when it came to Gautam Menon's movie is that he tackles as well on another societal issue, which is child abuse. At least it's a societal issue mostly talked about in India, but it doesn't mean that the Western world doesn't have child abuse. Sometimes it's even worse. But he tackles child abuse through the lens of a woman, which could be also read in multiple ways, as in sexual abuse. And I think this theme, it's also very relevant to Indian society, and we come back as well to women's security in India, which is not always the greatest. But these kind of movies, I believe that they have to be made to sensibilize and to educate society, to make them understand that it is something that needs to be talked about. Most of these things are taboos, and Gautam Menon's movie shows that through Simran's eyes, through a woman's eyes. It's very surprising to see a man kind of facing this issue more so than the woman. The woman is afraid of what kind of look society is going to have if they take a certain decision. So it was very surprising and I think refreshing to see that a man is encouraging a woman to make the right step for their daughter. So definitely I really like it. And then you have also the other side, which is kind of endorsed by the elder brother of the family in Gautam Menon's movie, which is very much, I mean, it's very much self kind of revenge or this kind of thing, which I think it's satisfactory on one side, because definitely I've felt satisfaction towards the end of the movie when Bharat, which is the elder brother, kind of does it his own way. But then again, you have a contrast with your own moral. Like, is it morally right to take revenge by yourself in this kind of cases? I'm not gonna spoil it. I'm not gonna spoil it like I did with Sudha Kongara's movie. But if you watch it, I think that you may pose yourself this kind of question. Is it right to take revenge by yourself, or to make justice by yourself when authorities aren't there, or you don't want to face authorities? Yeah, it's kind of like that. I think I gave it away. I think I gave away a bit of the story, but please watch it. The four of them are really, really interesting movies, and I would encourage people to watch it, because definitely is a very good anthology, and I think it's something that we've never seen in Tamil cinema, at least until now. Last but not least, let's talk about music and performances, because I think that the music here is also quite significant of the stories that we're gonna get and how they connect with the story. I think especially the Vignesh Shivan's story really connects with the music that it's proposed in the story. First of all, it is a multi music director album, so you have different music directors for each story. It is not pertinent to the same story. You don't have different music directors for one story. For example, Sudha Kongara is one. The music is composed by Paava Kadhaigal, who you might have known for movies like, for example, Dear Comrade in Telugu. I don't remember if he did anything in Tamil. I think he did, but I don't remember actually at the moment. Maybe not really. I don't remember him doing at least any of my of any Tamil movie that I have watched. He hasn't composed anything that of anything that I've watched in Tamil. I know that he is gonna compose the music for Radheshyam, the Prabhas Pooja and Pooja Hegde starrer. But Paava Kadhaigal, I think from Dear Comrade, if you listen to a lot of music from Dear Comrade, he has his own kind of style, and directors who come from the Malayalam kind of spectrum, music directors that come from that spectrum, although he has scored, Paava Kadhaigal has scored a lot of Tamil music, he also comes from that Malayalam directorial spectrum. And definitely you can feel that kind of sense. I think Tangame is my favorite track both the more happy and joyful version of it, and as well the sad version. It's very emotional because it comes at a certain point in the movie that it really touches your heart. Then for Vignesh Shivan, we have Anirudh Ravichandran, which I think is the most famous music director in the whole of India, not only Tamil Nadu but also India itself. I mean, if I have to quote music albums he composed for, I'm thinking about 3 or Moon, with starring Dhanush and Shruti Hassan and directed by Aishwarya Dhanush, which has been also his debut back in 2012. I'm thinking about Remo, starring Kirti Suresh and Siva Karthikeyan. I'm thinking about the bigger ones, and the most recent one is Master, starring Vijay and Vijay Sethupathi. So we have, I mean, he is really a household name by now. The interesting thing about his songs for Vignesh Shivan's movie is that the sad version of Lopana Utranon, which is the title of the song, you have a credit song which is much more joyful, and then you have this version which is a dad song, because we have this dad in Vignesh Shivan's story, which it's very touching, and the lyrics themselves are written by Vignesh Shivan. And to be honest, I didn't mind them because they, despite being very simple, they are very meaningful and they are very pertinent to the story. So I think that it fits well. It fits very well, extremely well when, oh my god, the car, sorry. It fits extremely well when music directors and directors can have this kind of conversation, I think. And then we have Mr. Gautam Menon, probably picking up one of the oldest glory, because I think Karthik is not well known as a music director. He's much more well known as a singer, as a playback singer. Most of the times I've been hearing him for singing for Estaman or for A.R. Rahman as well, the legend himself. But I think that a lot of songs sung by Karthik were in Gautam Menon's movies. I'm thinking about Vinatandi Orvaya. He had sung something, I believe. If I'm not wrong. I could be wrong here, but I think he had sung something. But Karthik, anyway, to me, he has a very recognizable voice. And this time as a composer, I mean, I have to put my hands up, because he's absolutely, he's very good. He sings in the song called Ponnatai, which is a character-oriented song. And then I think the legend, the myth, Miss Bombay Jayashri sings Kanne Nanu, which is a much slower and sad song. And I think that both compositions really put well the story together. I think I've said it 3 times by now, but they really put the narrative very well together. The interesting thing is that Vetrimaraan story doesn't have music, doesn't have songs. It has only background scores. I have no idea about who composed the background scores. I think it's either I don't know. I really don't know who did the scores for Vetrimaraan. I think it's R. Sivatmika, which is also the composer for the intro, for the start credits of Paava Kadhaigal, because as each of them has an episode, it's kind of an episode format. They have an intro song, an opening song, and the opening song is Kanne Kanmaniye, and it's a very sad song, so it kind of puts you in a mood. in kind of a mood of, in a very serious mood, and definitely it is something that strikes out. And yeah, I think they're very good. They're very good songs. As I said, my favorite is Tangame, but also Ponatai, it's another one of my favorites. I would just listen to it all day long and I would not get tired of it. Coming to performances, okay, this one is tough because more or less everyone has been very good. So my problem is choosing the best performances, because definitely the one that stands out from the first movie is Kalidas Jayaram, and he's the actor playing Sattar. Kalidas Jayaram, I don't know his works, what kind of works he has done in the past, so it has been my very first time watching him on screen, and he was so convincing. He was so naive. He was very much of a fragile soul, misunderstood soul, kind of a bit of like a child to a certain extent, an ungrown child. That's what Sattar to me is, and he could encapsulate it so well. His naivety, his expressing himself, his being cocky. I'm talking about the character now, I'm talking about Sattar. And Kalidas could just put it all together, and that definitely made me more invested into the story as I was watching it. I think one of the revelations in this anthology has probably been, I wouldn't say Anjali, but Simran. I mean, I know she's a seasoned actress, and I mean, of course, she's a very seasoned actress, and she's done works. She's been in Betta with Rajinikanth. She also did a cameo appearance in the remake of Panpaja Bharat called Haha Kalyanam. So pretty much, she's a seasoned actress. She's an actress of the 90s, of the 80s. So she's a very well-known actress in the Tamil industry. But I think she was kind of like a revelation for me, because I've never seen her in a full-fleshed kind of role. I've seen her cameo appearance in Aha Kalyanam, but I've never seen her in a full-fledged role. This was my first time, and seeing her acting the way she acted, it was very nice. I think the one that really was a bit of a letdown for me was Gautam Menon. I think I like him more as a director than as an actor. This is not a critique to Gautam Menon as an actor, absolutely, because if I think back to maybe Trance, which is a Malayalam movie, and Malayalam is not even his first language, I think he did a decent job in expression, in kind of like expression. There is one particular scene where I thought the expression wasn't really right at the time, but it was a crying scene, and I could see him almost laugh rather than crying. So I was a bit like, kind of, it tuned me a bit off for a second, but then the scene after kind of put me back on track, and I'm like, oh, okay, we're back on this. Aditya Bhaskar as well as Bharat, he was very convincing. He had a very short role, but he was very convincing, and definitely I'd wish I could see more of him in the future. Hopefully. I don't think he's a well-known actor. I think it was his debut role. I'm not sure, but definitely I will want to see more of this actor, because he's very good. He's really good. And talking about Vignesh Shivan's segment, Anjali, definitely she made a comeback. She made a really good comeback. She's been a bit like in the shadow for the past few years, because I think scripts weren't as accessible for female actresses as they are today, hence why she kind of took a break from the Tamil and the Telugu industry, and she kind of put herself more into the Malayalam industry, for example. So I really think that her comeback in the Tamil industry was strong. It's definitely one of those roles that is relevant into your career. And yeah, definitely another surprise was Kalki Koechlin, which I think she's so underrated in the North. She's so underrated in the North that, I mean, and she dubs herself in the movie, which is amazing. I love it so much. I don't understand why directors sometimes choose to pick a dubbing artist for an actress, either if they know the language or they don't know the language. I think they should dub themselves. I mean, only them can definitely match their style of acting, or maybe even increase it. Who knows? So, for example, I think that, I'll do an example here, but it's very kind of set in stone. Shruti Hassan, for a lot of her Telugu movies and even some Tamil movies, she gets dubbed from dubbing actresses. Most of the times they are actually singers. For example, Chinmay Sripada, she dubs most of the time for Samantha in Tamil. So I really don't get why, despite actresses may know the language, and Samantha is also another one. Samantha knows both Telugu and Tamil, and yet she gets dubbed, and I don't understand why. I don't understand why they dub her constantly. She knows how to speak Telugu, she knows how to speak Tamil, she knows how to speak Hindi, so I don't understand why she gets dubbed, why directors choose other people to dub them rather than themselves. And Amala Paul, it's another perfect example of another actress that gets dubbed. Yet actors never get dubbed, because of course they're the star of the show, so they never get dubbed. This is definitely an interesting kind of discussion that can be kind of balanced or talked about in one of the episodes. So I hope to bring it soon. But yeah, overall, coming back to performances, overall each movie has its strength, its point of strength, its strength point, and it has its strength performances and downfalls as well. But overall, I think this anthology, it's really good, and I can't wait to see more material coming out from Netflix India, like productions from India, and maybe even dubbed in my own language, because being Italian and being someone that speaks English, but sometimes probably my family as well, my mom looks at Indian cinema and she probably would like it to be dubbed in her own language to understand it better, rather than reading subtitles sometimes. And I hope that this kind of material can be also dubbed in other languages, because so that people can discover new words, new kind of cinemas, new kind of identity, and new kind of train thoughts in different countries. I think it's essential to do this kind of movies, not only for kind of, let's say, not only as an advertisement issue of what's going on in India and kind of the very not only for the very difficult topics and hard topics that the movies may deal with, but also for the kind of understanding of how Asian societies works and how they could be improved, what can we learn from Asian societies, and what can we also improve as Westerners. How can we improve ourselves towards Asian societies? I think there is a lot of stigma or a lot of stereotypes going around for not only for the Indian society, but I'm talking about any society, any Southeast Asian society. The Westerner kind of put them in a box, categorize them as a certain type of individuals, when sometimes it's completely different from what we expect. So definitely I would advise anyone to watch this movie. This movie is currently dubbed in Tamil and English, but it has many subtitles options. So please go and watch it. I would definitely watch it again, and definitely I wouldn't recommend it more than what I'm doing now. So please go watch it and open your mind and ask yourselves questions if you want as well. Ask yourself questions about how can I improve myself to be a better human being. I think that's what this movie wants to be about. How can I improve myself to be a better human being? So that's it for this episode of Let's Talk About, this first episode of Let's Talk About. I hope I wasn't, I probably am too long, but I hope I was as clear as possible. It's my first episode, so pardon me if I made a lot of mistakes. If I made a lot of mistakes, please, if you're listening to this episode on YouTube, please let me know in the comments. Support the channel, support the podcast. It would be great if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell and put the notification on all, so you will never miss an update on this channel. If you're listening to it on Spotify or Google Podcast, please follow the podcast, and I will wait for you in the next episode, which I think it's gonna be real soon. It's not gonna take too long. It's gonna be soon. Until then, please stay safe and stay home, stay safe, and if you can stay home. If you have to go out, but most of all, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next episode. Peace out.